Poker night with the guys is usually an occasion for beer and chips, possibly moldy sandwiches and a few shots of whiskey. But when Felix Unger is around, the food gets all gourmet on you, and the drinks always get served on coasters. So if a person with these kinds of talents in the kitchen decided to brew some coffee for his friends, just how good would that be? Well, if he ordered some Sparkplug coffee, and you should know that they deliver to Americans, so a modern-day Felix could do that. The drinks would be beyond splendid. Although, yes, hot drinks are a weird choice for games of stud or no-limit Texas Hold'em, especially in the middle of July like this movie is. Everyone's sweaty, probably don't want coffee. But work with me here, man. We have a sponsor to promote. It's Sparkplug Coffee. And it's not a chore to do that because they're actually good. They have the freshest beans in Canada, which are fairly traded premium Arabica bean jobs. They've got all kinds of blends and roasts, but they also have a rotating seasonal blend. They've even got the easier on your blood pressure options of half-calf and decaf. I mentioned a moment ago that Sparkplug delivers to customers in America, but they also, of course, deliver to our fellow Canadians, and those great white northerners get to enjoy free shipping. But it's not just about getting your order within a week, which you will. It's about deciding to become a member of the Autopilot Coffee Club. That gets you perks and deals that some indifferent slob like Oscar will never enjoy because he can't be bothered to member up. And even though he doesn't seem to care about making good economic decisions, a careless guy like him won't save money in every order the way a member will. Members can also customize to get their orders when it suits them. So if they're out sadly wandering the street while staring down the barrel of a divorce, they can pause or even cancel their orders, because coffee's probably not a priority. So even if you're not a writer like Felix and Oscar are, you're certainly good enough at the typey type to enter sparkplug.coffee/HYES into your browser. You'll get a one-time 20% discount by using that HYES promo code. Okay, we need Andrew Luther to hit us with that theme song he wrote for this podcast so we can get the conversation started. Sir, bring it!
And action. Have you ever seen
The Odd Couple? Hey, good people, and thank you very much for your download or your stream of the 511th Yak Fest known as Have You Ever Seen? We go back into the far-off past to review motion picture classics, and we spoil the linguine out of them. We just don't throw those spoilers at the wall like Oscar Madison does in this movie. I'm the non-gambling man who never looks entirely clean-shaven, especially at 1 a.m, the way these guys do, Ryan Ellis. Now here's the lady who never misses her friend's Friday night poker games, which she always tells me is book club. My wife, Bev.
That's me.
You were gambling on Sunday afternoon, I think. Mm-hmm. The gambling here is fitting because Walter Matthau was known to gamble. I think he had a problem, in fact. I think I've heard that in recent times, yeah. Okay, the coming attractions trivia involves Walter Matthau. He and Jack Lemmon were in 10 movies together, and Lemmon also directed his longtime friend in Koch. So, 11 collaborations. We've never covered one of their collaborations before now, though. What was the first film they made together, and what was the last film they made together?
The first film was called The Fortune Cookie, same year as this movie.
No, it was 66.
Take it back. The last film was the sequel to The Odd Couple.
How about that?
The Odd Couple 2.
Most people will know them best from either this or the Grumpy Old Men pictures. I bet a lot of people our age would say Grumpy Old Men.
Oh, definitely Grumpy Old Men. Yeah. Those came out when I was the perfect age to enjoy them.
And they were fun, and these guys had worked together so often before, most of us didn't know that. These two old dudes who'd been acting forever, maybe people didn't even realize that. But yeah, The Fortune Cookie I happened to see recently. It was on Canopy, and I watched it, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And Matthau won the supporting actor Oscar for that, but that was the first time together, and that was Billy Wilder directing them. Wilder was in line to direct this, but they changed it up to Gene Saks. It wasn't really all that well known, but he was the right choice because this movie really works. Well, The Odd Couple will be 55 years old tomorrow because it was released by Paramount on May 16th, 1968. It was a smash hit. It cost $1.2 million to make, but grossed over 44 million greenbacks in 1968. But Bev, the movie is 55 years old, so please give us a skinny on The Odd Couple. Please give us a skinny and the skinny now.
Jack Lemmon is Felix and Walter Matthau is Oscar. Two friends who were both recently divorced and so decide to shack up to save Oscar money and to give Felix a place to stay and some company.
Point of order, Felix is not divorced yet, he's only separated.
All right then, he's getting a divorce. So slovenly Oscar is quickly driven crazy by Felix's fastidiously clean nature, and so he conspires to loosen him up by having a little fun with some divorcees in their building.
Giggle, giggle, giggle.
But Felix ruins the evening by talking about his ex and killing the vibes. A huge argument follows. Oscar kicks Felix out. Felix moves in with the divorcees, and they both apologize, admitting that they've rubbed off on one another.
Or, in a nutshell, Fuss Budget's furious food fixing forces friend to freak out. Signed, F you.
Your favorite joke in the movie.
You laughed too.
It's funny.
It's one of the great lines that didn't make the AFI's quotes list. It was nominated, and I think it should have made it, but no controversial quote
Vulgarity,
with language. Right. Because in this case, it's implied F-bomb.
Which in 68 must have felt pretty scandalous, right?
I'll just say it right now. So it was nominated for the quotes, should have made it, but didn't. I cannot stand little notes on my pillow. We are all out of cornflakes. F you. It took me 3 hours to figure out F you was Felix Unger. I do like that quote. Okay, the Rotten Tomatoes numbers are quite good. 98% of critics like the film. 8 out of 10 is the average. There are only 40 reviews on the site. And 89% of audiences. That sequel you mentioned only got 27%. Apparently the premise is that they're back together after not seeing each other for a long time because their kids are getting married. I think it's Matthau's son and Lemmons' daughter, which is also what happens in one of the two Grumpy Old Men movies, maybe Grumpier Old Men, because Kevin Pollak and Daryl Hannah get together in those movies.
It's a good conceit to bring them together.
But they're stealing from Grumpier Old Men or Grumpy Old Men from only 5 or 6 years earlier.
I'm sure that's just what audiences wanted. Nobody was interested in them reinventing the wheel at that point.
And they got panned. This movie was third at the 1968 U.S. box office. 2001: A Space Odyssey was number 2. Oliver, which we covered a few months ago, was number 5. And Planet of the Apes and Rosemary's Baby were tied at number 6. And we've covered all those movies now. They're all in the archives. This was nominated for 2 Oscars. Neil Simon's adapted screenplay of his own play, so that's why it's adapted. And Frank Bracht, B-R-A-C-H-T, his editing. The Lion in Winter won for its script. I like that choice as much. In fact, I think probably more, and we might yet cover that before this year is over. And Bullet won for its editing. Action movie, that makes sense. The AFI lists, I talked about the quote that was nominated but didn't make it. The list it did make, it was 17th on the top 100 laughs, so top 20. Jack Lemmon was also in the number 1 comedy, Some Like It Hot. And I don't know if it's quite a number 17 comedy, but it was pretty funny. We did laugh a lot, and it was a lot of fun at the movies. You've never seen this before, though, right?
That's right.
So what are your thoughts on The Odd Couple?
I liked it. It's funny, but I have 2 things. I think that for every genuinely laugh-out-loud funny joke, there's another joke that's cringy and bad. Like the joke where Felix is cleaning his ear canals in public and making that weird noise. It went on forever. It wasn't that funny to begin with, and it made me feel bad for them. It was one of those jokes that was so bad it made me feel embarrassed for him. Maybe it worked better in the 60s. The other thing is that I felt like they got so close to having a really good emotional catharsis, but they didn't really earn it in the end. I wanted to feel Oscar and Felix's friendship, but instead it falls a little flat for me. I love that they seem to have a fresh take on male friendships and how important they can be, even though you poor men always have to pretend otherwise. And I really wish that they had gone all the way with that. Instead, it feels like they pulled their punches. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I do know what you mean. This is based on the play. I assume it's loyal to the play, too, because Neil Simon and the play itself won Tonys. It was so successful on Broadway. And then we talked about Gene Saks directing. His debut was Barefoot in the Park, which I think was the year before. That's Redford and Fonda. Jane Fonda, of course. If I've never said before, the 2 most attractive people paired together in a movie might very well be Barefoot in the Park with Redford and Jane Fonda, and I think 1967. Also a Neil Simon play, isn't it?
Yeah.
Barefoot in the Park, yeah.
Simon was nominated for 4 Oscars in 10 years. And all these weren't necessarily nominations, but his most famous films were, of course, The Odd Couple, but Barefoot in the Park, The Sunshine Boys, The Goodbye Girl. That was in about a 10-year span. And it is based on his Tony Award-winning hit Broadway play that was out in 1965.
It's so loyal to the play that they used this exact same set. They disassembled it from the stage and put it in a soundstage.
How big Walter Matthau's, Oscar Madison's place is. Now, his family had lived there, obviously, because look where Felix stays. He's in bunk beds. That's where the kids slept. So, yes, it was a family of at least 3, and I think it's supposed to be at least 2 kids, so probably a family of 4. He's a sports writer. They got paid pretty well, I think, in the 60s, but regardless, I'm not sure if the wife worked, but this is Manhattan. It's probably a Hollywood conceit, but it may not be, that they lived in this place, and it is cavernous.
It is huge.
There are 2 doors to the kitchen.
Yes! This is your bathroom. I'm sorry, they have their own bathrooms in this place? Where is this apartment that he can afford to live here? It is just so big. There's just so much excess space.
Lemmon's place in the apartment was way more believable. That was, of course, about 8 years before Wilder directed that film.
Also a very nice apartment, but looks like a nice one-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, there was room for a small dining room. He could have had. He didn't really have one. The Christmas tree's in that position, but he's got a decent living room, a small kitchen. The bedroom and the bathroom are fine. And so much of the time he's not in his apartment anyway because he's loaning it out to people to do things in there that he doesn't get to do. But yes, Matthau's apartment in this, Oscar Madison, you could have multiple people living there, not just a family of 4. You'd have a family of 10 probably living in this place, and it's just 2 guys for most of the film. What about the concept? It's been done many times. The play, this movie, 3 TV series at least. Maybe there's more than that. Of course, the sequel movie you talked about too. But Tony Randall and Jack Klugman, 70 to 75, won many Emmy Awards. I think they both won at different times.
Did you ever see it?
Maybe here and there, but
I've never seen it.
And then there was the New Odd Couple in the early 80s, 82 to 83, only 18 episodes, and that was a Gary Marshall thing. It was black people, Ron Glass and Desmond Wilson. So it was the Black Odd Couple, but they call it the New Odd Couple, and it didn't succeed. But then the one that did okay, I guess, because it lasted 3 years, Matthew Perry playing Oscar and Thomas Lennon playing Felix, ran from 2015 to 2017.
That lasted 3 years? I remember hearing about it when they were premiering it.
And that'll last months.
And then I never heard anything about it again. I assumed that it failed to launch altogether.
I always think about some of these shows that you and I have never watched and we're not interested in the first place with people that we like. Maybe the best example in recent history for me, maybe you too, is Mom. Allison Janney and Anna Faris, 2 funny, talented people. They did that show for a long time. We never even thought about watching it, but it lasted that long.
It was a Chuck Lorre show. It was a hit.
It was a hit.
It was a hit.
By the way, a quick little factoid for baseball fans, because, of course, Walter Matthau's character, Oscar, is a baseball writer for the New York Mets, who were still fairly new in New York at that point. They'd only been around since, I think, it's 62. The year after this movie was released, but 2 years after it was made, because it was made in 67, but it came out in 68. But in 1969, they won the World Series, the amazing Mets. But in 67, when they were making it, they were 10th, which was the bottom of the league. Then they were 9th the year it came out. But the very next year after being 9th and 2 years after being 10th, they win the whole World Series. So just a little factoid for those who might care about that. Chris and I would have had to really jam this into scoring at the movies. But there is a baseball scene, and it does involve... No, it doesn't involve Roberto Clemente because apparently he ran too fast. The triple play that Oscar misses when Felix is calling him about the menu that night they're going to have at home. I missed the triple play. But it is Pittsburgh versus New York. The movie does have an awful lot of verisimilitude in New York too, because when it starts, we're seeing all the shiny New York City signs late at night. And Felix is depressed, walking sadly, and heading to a hotel to jump out the window. Now, you hadn't seen the movie before, and I forget, but did you predict what he was doing when he was going for the high...
They tried to put him in a room on the 3rd floor, and he's like, do you have anything higher? I was like, oh, he's going to jump out the window. We already hear he has no luggage. He looks pretty despondent.
You don't know why he's doing this, though.
No. I knew the basic premise of the movie, but... They don't move in together until, 40, 50 minutes into the movie? The motive for them moving in together is that Felix is pretty seriously suicidal, and his friends, who are a bunch of macho, bro-y dudes...
But they do care.
But they care! My favorite thing about the movie is, in the beginning, you're watching these men who don't really know how to emote and how to care for each other, but care so much about their buddies. Even though he's high maintenance and difficult and whiny...
And not just this night, probably always.
There's no way that they didn't know Felix was always like this. There's no way Felix hid this part of his personality because he actually is very boldly himself. Mm-hmm. He's not ashamed when he's moved in there of his fancy cocktails and his coasters and the way he vacuums and wearing an apron. It doesn't even dawn on him to be ashamed of the way he is. So, his friends love him exactly the way he is and are
sometimes tolerate.
Oh, sure, but isn't that true about all your friends? Yeah. They certainly tolerate Oscar, too, although Oscar definitely has no shame where he ought to have a little more shame than he does. Mm-hmm. But fine, that's the way it is. He's not embarrassed by himself, and his friends make fun of him and tease him or complain about the fact that his apartment smells bad, and he's serving them moldy sandwiches.
It's either old meat or new cheese.
Yeah. And I just love how much these guys, even though they don't have the language or the emotional training for it, love their friend so much and are doing their very best to do right by him and protect him and save his life. My favorite thing about this movie is the sincere and earnest take on male friendship and how important these relationships actually are for these guys.
Yeah, because Oscar's going through it too. You said divorced and you're skinny. I think he's actually still just separated himself. But in any case, we'll go with the divorce.
He's freshly removed from his marriage.
Yeah, they're not in their marriages in that way. And of course, Felix's is going to end when the movie is over. It almost feels like Oscar's maybe has a shot at rekindling, although probably not.
And as much as Oscar can, especially at the beginning of the movie, seem a little irredeemable in the way that he lives is so disgusting, but he's immediately redeemed as soon as he's on the phone with his kid, and he could care less about his poker game and everything else that's going on, and he's just so happy to talk to his little boy. That's like a pretty sweet moment and a very nice save the cat redemption for a character that needs a little more help than Felix does, I think, as far as redemption goes.
He's not really bad-mouthing his ex that much either on the phone.
No.
Or when he hangs up, it's not like, oh, that crone, or anything like that.
Another cool thing about these two guys is they are like, of course my wife left me. Look how hard it is to live with me. I'm impossible. And they know this about themselves when they move in together. They know what their challenges are going to be, and they still do it anyway.
Well, it's Oscar's idea, and I said in my intro that at 1 a.m., these guys have perfectly shaved faces. I don't at probably 10 a.m. if I've shaved at 9. And that's me, I guess, more than them. But it's a Hollywood thing, too, because I don't know if it was even outside. It might have been in some studio. They look that clean-shaven at 1 o'clock in the morning after Oscar's been drinking for hours as well, and Felix is depressed.
Everybody has like a thing that takes them out of a movie. They can never unsee. I
think the shaving thing is one for me.
The shaving thing is a big trigger for you.
Yeah. But anyway, so Felix needs a place to go, and Oscar almost has the feeling of, I'm not thinking about this. This is going to happen. This isn't a, oh, well, Felix is going to be a pain. No, you're going to live with me. He's not going to make him, but this isn't really a choice. It's more like, of course you would. Probably never realizing that Felix would be so bad, but Felix warns him how bad he could end up being. And at the end, when they have their big fight, that does have that cornflakes thing about the signed F.U. I like how, or maybe it's later on, but at some point towards the end of the film, Felix is the one that says, yelling at him, you're a great guy, you're a stand-up guy, you'll always be good in my books because you took me when I needed you. But still, he's also frustrated with the fact that Oscar is so cavalier, including the night when the ladies come over, Cecily and Gwendolyn. Oscar keeps getting their names wrong, gets them mixed up, who's who. They are sisters. And there's a fun touch in the end credits where they have the names in the wrong places and then poof, flip them over.
Yeah, it's very cute.
So Monica Evans and Carol Shelley play Cecily and Gwendolyn.
I thought they were going to be these insipid, annoying characters.
Because they do giggle constantly.
The giggling is so annoying, and I was like, oh, okay. The movie had already had some sexist tropes, which, whatever, it's made in 1968. I'm not going to be mad about it. I thought, oh, okay, these characters are going to be really empty-headed twits, but they have their own story to tell. They have their own depth, empathy that they have for Felix, and that scene did not play out the way I expected it to, and I really liked it.
And they take him in at the end, of course, too, although how long is he going to last with them? So what happens next, by the way, let's do that right now. Felix finds someone to be a port in the storm, beyond Cecily and Gwendolyn, because this man needs to be married and he needs to have someone to wait on. He really should give up the news writing, because that's what he is. He tells them he's a news writer. We didn't hear that until that point. Oscar being a sports writer, we knew long before in the film's chronology. So give up the news writing and just get a job as a butler.
Yeah.
As for Oscar, he never changes until he suffers a massive heart attack, but he recovers from that and then still doesn't change. I gotta be me.
Yeah, sounds about right.
By the way, let's talk about their credits, because I've done the Matthau impression a little bit. I don't know if I'm very good at it, but that was what Dan Castellaneta was doing in the early years of The Simpsons. He was going for a Matthau thing. So those who maybe didn't know, and you hear the early years of The Simpsons, I guess people don't tend to watch the first year that much. Maybe into the second year.
Tracy Ullman stuff, too.
Right.
He sounds so
He was doing a Matthau impression, and then I guess he found his own way. And most of the time he's been Homer. It's not really that close to Matthau, but at that point he was doing that. And you and I have never talked about Matthau before. Chris and I did. For Scoring at the Movies, he was in The Bad News Bears. But this is our first Matthau film, and the guy made so many movies. Lemmon we've talked about constantly. He won Oscars for Mr. Roberts, supporting actor, and Save the Tiger. We didn't cover those. But we did do Some Like It Hot, of course, and The Apartment. They were both on the AFI's Top 100 list. The China Syndrome, where he's terrific, with Jane Fonda and Michael Douglas. He had a brief cameo in The Player. He was also in The Legend of Bagger Vance, which Chris and I covered and Scored at the Movies. And we will be covering Shortcuts in June. So we talked a lot about Lemmon, but not about Matthau until now.
We did talk about Lemmon also in the Movies We Hate podcast.
Glengarry Glen Ross.
Because I hate Glengarry
Maybe the best performance he ever gave. And I watched that again last week.
In an unwatchable movie.
You're so wrong.
According to me.
Art Carney, by the way, played Felix in the play. So this is the guy from The Honeymooners. He's Ralph's friend in that. And then he won an Oscar the year after Lemmon did. Lemmon's was Save the Tiger in 1973, the year that could have been Pacino and Serpico, Nicholson in The Last Detail, Brando in Last Tango in Paris, the year after he won for The Godfather. But Lemmon won. Save the Tiger's a good performance. Probably should have been one of those other people. But then the next year after that was Art Carney in a movie about him and his cat, Harry and Tonto. So there's a bit of a connection there. But Lemmon was a good choice. I did read on Wikipedia that somebody said he really laid it on thick, but as much as I like Lemmon in some of the movies, he did tend to lay it on a little thick. Even in Glengarry Glen Ross, having watched that again, I like it way more than you do, obviously, and probably more than most people do. Lemmon, I think, should have been nominated for an Oscar, maybe even should have won, but he was a big actor. It's like that line I'm sure I've told you before because we've covered Lemmon so often, where Billy Wilder said to him, "Can you do a little less?" "What do you want? Nothing?" "Please." Meaning dial it down, dial it down, dial it down. And it still wasn't enough for Wilder because Lemmon was just such a naturally big, expressive actor.
Some parts call for a big performance.
Some like it hot.
Most comedies call for a big performance. Even the straight man has to really overdo it. Some actors are just great at overdoing it. Can never not give that big fat performance, and that's always going to be Lemmon. If you don't want a big performance, don't cast Lemmon in your movie.
Fair point, yeah. Did you like him in this?
I like him in everything. I love Jack Lemmon. He is just one of the most charming, lovely screen presences. I would compare him to Tom Hanks. You feel like you're home with him. Does that make sense?
Well, also the comedy and drama thing, because he could do drama very well. Save the Tiger is very serious, as I recall.
Comedians are usually the best actors, period, because comedy is hard. We always say that. Comedians are often the most incredible dramatic actors.
Good choice, though, too, because lovability really fits there, and people always want to compare Hanks to James Stewart, and that's fair sometimes. I think the better comparison is Henry Fonda, but Lemmon might be a good one also. I think Matthau might actually be a little bit better than Lemmon in this movie, though, because it seems like it fits his personality more, and I read that Neil Simon wanted him to play Oscar, which I think he did on the stage.
He did.
But then Matthau said, "I want the challenge, let me play Felix, it's different from me." And the idea was, no, but it's the movie. Can you just do the character that we know you're going to hit a home run with? And he must have known Lemmon. Well, he did know Lemmon from The Fortune Cookie. Maybe didn't know him that well yet. He didn't know whether their lives are going to go together because I mentioned Koch. Lemmon directed that. He's not in it. Matthau is the main star. That was a couple years after this. And then there weren't that many years where they worked together for a while. No, they did some movies in the 70s maybe. But then the 90s, I think it was 4 movies they made together, Lemmon and Matthau. And I think I would actually say that Matthau might be a little bit better than this, and maybe because it's such perfect casting. He wanted the challenge, but he was wrong, because it would have been the wrong choice for him to play Felix. Although him being the one who's fastidious, putting down coasters and serving this beautiful food and being so anal about everything would have been funny too, probably.
Yeah, I believe you. I think that he could have done it, and I love him in this movie as well. Their performances, they really make it. The writing is good. I don't think I've ever been the world's biggest Neil Simon fan, but you can't deny the wit of just his plays on words and the way he crafts a story. He was a very gifted writer. I think maybe one of the flaws of this movie is that it doesn't really escape its staginess.
True.
It does just feel like you're watching a play. The set does not help. You know, we never see that fourth wall. Even when they're sitting playing poker, they leave the one chair empty the whole time, so that it's if you're watching a play and it just feels so unnatural. Why are these guys crammed together on one side of the table?
I agree, and I read that online, and I, of course, noticed when we saw the movie, but I will cut it a little bit of slack because, for one thing, Matthau was in the kitchen making sandwiches for a while, so those 3 guys being on their side of the table makes a little bit of sense. And also, who's the missing person?
Yeah.
That's his chair that we're seeing through.
It feels a little stagey, though.
But it is stagey, I'll give you that. But there is at least a little bit of motivation for that. One thing we get, and going back to the beginning again here, is that Lemmon hurts himself multiple times. We can relate to this even more, I guess, now, as I'm nearly 50 and you're mid-40s. He hurts his back trying to open the window in the hotel, and that's why he doesn't jump out. He probably wouldn't have anyway, but he couldn't when he couldn't open the window because, oh, my back. And then he hurts his neck trying to take a drink in a bar.
Yeah.
You can relate to that maybe even more than I can.
Literally this week, I have a crick in my neck. It's driving me crazy. I can't sleep on the side I normally sleep on. I'm 45. I have an acute case of being 45.
And, of course, the fastidiousness. We're not quite the odd couple, but I'm the Felix.
You are so the Felix.
And you're the Oscar.
We're the opposite of what you expect a man and woman to be, because truly, you are the clean one and I am the slob. But there's so much about this movie that is wrapped up in gender. Felix is the woman in this relationship, and they are not being vague about it. They put him in an apron. They don't outright call him the wife, but there's a couple of direct references to the fact that he's the lady of the house.
He's the emotional one. He cries in front of the guys. Well, he goes over there, and they pretend they don't know what's going on with the separation that night, and they don't know what he did, and even thinking about trying to kill himself. He reveals later he took pills. They're concerned about their friend, and in that scene, when he's sitting down in one of the chairs in Oscar's place, he does cry. Oscar doesn't cry. Why would he anyway? But he doesn't cry.
He even has a feminine affectation with his posture, the way he sits, the way he talks. I never read this in an interview or anything, but I feel like when Lemmon played it, he played it as if he was doing at least a mild impersonation of a woman.
Who sold it better when they tried to cross-dress to get away from the mob in Some Like It Hot? Between Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis.
True.
Jack Lemmon.
Way more convincing as
Why would a guy want to marry a guy? Security!
One of the greatest jokes in Hollywood history.
I'm going to watch that movie again. I see it on Canopy all the time. I think it's going to go away pretty soon, so maybe I missed my chance. We own the DVD. I could watch it anyway, but I never loved Some Like It Hot, but when we saw it for the podcast, I liked it more, and I feel like I've seen it at least once since then. That was a long time ago. That was almost 10 years ago. Curtis is good. Marilyn Monroe is good. The other cast members are good. But Jack Lemmon, I remember being awesome in that.
Yeah, so perfectly cast, a perfect performance. He is so funny in that movie. Without him, that movie would be nothing. But with him, it is lightning in a bottle. He is so funny in that movie. And you're right, he has this feminine persona. I've really thought about this, but in every movie I think I've seen him in, he does bring that energy. This movie's been done many times. Specifically, The Odd Couple. There's all these versions of The Odd Couple. But this story, in many ways, is really borrowed directly, note for note, from a sitcom marriage. A woman is trying to vacuum around her husband's feet, and he's just trying to peacefully watch the game. Marriage, am I right? It feels like that same conflict where you have a woman who's so annoying, trying to cook and clean and take care of somebody who just wants to relax and do nothing. Now, as the person who just wants to relax and do nothing, I am sympathetic towards that character, but it's pretty hard to defend the position of Oscar, who gets mad at Felix for cleaning up after him, even though he is repugnant. He is disgusting.
Throwing the spaghetti or linguine at the wall in the kitchen just to make a point.
Getting annoyed with him at every
Don't you touch that spaghetti!
Yeah. And even when Felix is asking people to use a coaster, he has this really lovely demeanor about him where he's just like, oops, use a coaster. He's not lecturing people. The only time he even gets mad at Oscar is when Oscar is an hour later than he said he was going to be after he invited company over.
That was his plan.
Felix is so right to be mad at him in that moment because it was all Oscar's idea, and Felix offers to cook, and he's like, all you could do is just tell me you're going to be an hour late, and I know you were out of the bar having a drink. He's every right to be mad at him. Meanwhile, Oscar is annoyed with Felix constantly. And I feel like this is probably a movie, or play, I should say, that was written expecting an audience of men. Women at the time were always going to be the object of jokes. Oh, the long-suffering husband has to put up with his wife. And like every wife who's just trying to literally do all the things she's expected to, everybody would be mad at her if she didn't keep a clean house, if she didn't deliver dinner on time.
You know what? We're recording this on a Monday night. It was 2 days ago. Your dad and your stepmom, who are almost always early getting to our place, because of traffic, not their fault, they were later than they ever are, maybe 45 minutes late, and I was making pasta. And I'm now thinking, okay, I got to turn the sauce down. And when do I start putting in the spaghetti?
The linguine.
I was making both linguine, I guess. And I was making penne because I wanted options. I wanted the penne, and everyone else ended up having spaghetti, linguine, whatever. I wasn't mad at them at all. I understood what was going on. But then it becomes a matter of, okay, well, how do I time this? Because I was timing this for around this time, and now it's going to be later, and I don't even know when.
Yeah, it's hard.
So I can relate to that one a little bit, too.
Yeah, I sympathize with Felix throughout, but I feel like he is overwhelmingly the butt of the joke, and that could be a bit of sexism, a bit of homophobia. Of course the movie's sexist, of course the movie's homophobic. It was made in 1968. I actually don't really think it's that bad considering how much humanity every single character gets and how it fights against type of men being unemotional or too strong to need help the way that these men need help from each other. So I think in many ways it bucks those stereotypes. Even having a character like Felix, who's unashamed of the way he is, bucks that stereotype too.
You can see why the wife might have got sick of him. He's going to be like this all the time, though.
No, he would be low-key impossible to live with. If I lived with him, he would drive me insane.
I think their arrangement, from what I gather, is that she was the housewife, meaning that was her job. She took care of the kids, and she took care of the home. But then he's the better cook, and he's the one who's more fastidious about how things are done. So maybe that's what it was in the end. She was driven crazy by the fact that it was never good enough. And if she's not a good cook, okay, maybe he's got a point. But also, if this is your arrangement, you got to respect what she's doing to some degree.
What's your take as the man who is the Felix in our relationship?
I was about to get to that.
Yeah.
My point about things like cleanliness are, I'm pretty clean, but I'm not completely crazy about it by any means. We have two dogs all the time. We currently have a foster. They're never going to help, especially since we're still in the spring and coming out of the winter. paw marks and snow and
floors are
sleet and
never
mud.
clean.
Never fully clean. And yet in the summer, they're pretty good. And I even said to you last year, I like our kitchen floor when it's nice and polished clean. I don't polish it, I guess, but you mop it clean. I'm wearing bare feet, which I'm not currently doing. It's beginning of May right now. I like all those kinds of things, but it's more a matter of how clean as I go. I see crap on the floor. Where's the dustbuster? Boom, gone. I'll see this mess on the floor, the sink, or the bathroom, whatever it is. Boom, done. This isn't me spending hours scrubbing and scouring. It's more a matter of I'll just clean as I go, and it never gets that bad. But your stepmom comes over here, and she never would do this. But if we said to her, Donna, be fully honest about what you think about the cleanliness level in this place after I've done the best I ever do. And if she was fully honest, it still wouldn't be good enough because she's more like Felix.
Their house is immaculate all the time.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know how well I would live with Donna. Or I should say, I don't know how well Donna would live with us. And you're right, she would never, ever say it. But she is actually Felix level of
Because the
clean.
biggest problem with Felix, really, if you think about it, is that he is this way. He can't help himself. Oscar is the complete opposite, which they both knew going into this. Oscar took him in. Thank God Felix recognizes that was a good thing to do. But if Oscar's going to be, well, maybe not this messy, but you knew he was like this. This isn't that much of a surprise. Then if you don't like the way he's doing things, quietly go behind him and maybe fix it up. And if he does push back, then say, okay, fine. I won't dwell on everything. And it seems like Felix is home more often because Oscar goes for drinks with the guys. Part of Oscar's problem in this movie, because he's been separated for, I think, a while. It seems like it's been a while. Is that he wants Cecily and Gwendolyn. This double date's going to go, hey, well, let's go all the way. We're going to do it tonight, baby. Felix has been separated for, I think at that point, a week. He's not even close to her. He shouldn't be close to over his wife. So that's part of the problem is Oscar wants to have fun. Let's go bowling. Let's play pool. Okay, well, even doing that, Felix isn't having much fun, let alone with the women. He's not ready yet. But even the sense of being tidy, Felix could do that. And then if Oscar didn't really have too much resentment about it, just like I do. You get frustrated sometimes. In your mind, you think, can you not do this one little thing? If it takes a few seconds, do it yourself and it's done. But Felix has to be so vocal about it. I think that's the biggest problem for Oscar.
Of course, if they didn't have this conflict, there would be no movie.
Also true.
So they have to be as extreme as possible. That's where all the comedy comes from. And it's a pretty good source of comedy. It comes from a bedrock of true good friendship. These two men do love each other. But without those extremities, it just wouldn't be nearly as fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And it is fun to watch Jack Lemmon when he's at his absolute zenith of housewifery, when he's dancing with a vacuum cleaner, when he's making fancy cocktails for everybody and custom sandwiches and doing everything just
I don't do
so.
these things.
No, you don't do those things.
So they have the date with the girls. Doesn't go very well. The meatloaf burns. Felix sulks. And Oscar is mad because he doesn't get what he wants that night with Cecily and Gwendolyn, which is also a little silly, Oscar. They agreed to go out with you one night. It didn't go badly. It just didn't go the way you wanted it to. There are other nights. But it's the next day when Oscar's given Felix a silent treatment, and they have the big fight. Leads into the FU note, of course, which I still think is so funny. We're out of cornflakes. But then Felix has his big Felix pushback.
You should start signing your notes with your initial. Leaving me notes.
I don't really do that at work. I had a different type of job than I do now, where you're supposed to barcode something with your initials. And then, of course, my initials are RE. Looks like regarding.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't do that.
Mine are BE, which also...
Yeah. I forget what I did, but I think I put Ryan is what it was, because somebody else always put his name, but then he quit, so there's no other Ryans there anymore. But what's important in the film, too, is that as mad as Oscar was, he gave him the silent treatment. When Felix leaves the apartment, Oscar takes the other guys and goes looking for him. That's another thing, too, by the way. The night when all this goes down and Felix is suicidal, they don't know it's that bad until he gets there, and they tells him about the pills, and they put him in the shower with his clothes on and all that. But it's the cop, Murray, who's the most worried about him.
Yeah.
It's not even Vinny, the John Fiedler character. So he was in 12 Angry Men. He's juror number 2 in that. And he was in the series, as were the two women, Monica Evans and Carol Shelley. I think they must have played these characters again. They were in a couple episodes in the series with Klugman and Randall. And Fiedler was too. But I like how it's the cop who's the most concerned about, maybe because he knows human nature. He's the most concerned about Felix and then driving around to try to find Felix, but they can't do it. So Oscar's redeemed by the fact that he kicks his friend out. Although you can understand why he's upset. It is his house, and this guy is trying to change all the rules, and I like my things the way they are. And there's got to be an element of, no matter how much you want to be clean, you're a guest.
Yeah, it is Oscar's house.
But he's also redeemed by the fact that he obviously feels guilty. And what is, I think, the last line of the whole movie, probably the last line of the whole play, which is, use a coaster or don't throw that stuff on the floor, to one of the other guys when, I guess it's 4 of them are playing poker. So he's changing a little bit at this point, at the very end of the film.
In the end, Felix is learning to be more independent. He's learning to have a little more fun. Oscar is learning to care just one iota about his environment. Because maybe you could read that his extreme level of messiness is an act of rebellion. A rebellion against his wife who left him. Certainly a rebellion against Felix, because what does he do when he's mad at him? He throws the pasta against the wall.
Mm. The odds are good that his wife was maybe not like Felix, but more like Felix than Oscar. Mm-hmm. So he's pushing back against that, too. And it's a big step at the end, because Felix won't talk to Frances, his ex-wife. Well, not ex yet. I guess they're just separated still. On the phone at the end, when he's going to go live with the girls for at least a little while. No, not going to talk to you. So however long it's been, a few weeks, I guess. She kicked him out. And he's about to move on. We talked about Lemmon and Matthau's credits. I just said John Fiedler's credits. Herb Edelman, who does play the cop, Murray, which should have been Sam's name. I know you dwell on that sometimes.
Because I'm right.
Our dog, Sam, should have been a Murray.
He should have been called Murray.
Like
Ryan wouldn't let me name him that, but he's the most Murray you've ever Murrayed.
So Edelman was in The Way We Were, which I covered a couple months ago by myself on this channel. He was also in Barefoot in the Park with Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. Larry Haynes is Speed. This was his first film. He worked almost entirely on TV. David Shiner was in The Greatest Story Ever Told a couple years before this, and then They Call Me Mr. Tibbs. They Call Me Mr. Tibbs. So not, of course, In the Heat of the Night, but the sequel to that, and did a ton of TV. And I mentioned Shelley and Evans were on the series. Didn't do a ton of things, but they were in the Odd Couple TV series. Gene Sachs directed Barefoot in the Park, and also Cactus Flower, which Matthau was in the year after this. Actually, that won Goldie Hawn an Oscar. So Neil Simon stuff, Gene Sachs stuff, a lot of Oscars followed them around in the next 10 or so years. But actually Sachs did more acting than he did directing. I didn't write down his credits, but he did more acting than directing. And I mentioned Simon's credits already. Huge success, one of the biggest names of all time in writing, Broadway and movies. Howard Koch, I assume it's Koch, K-O-C-H, he produced The Manchurian Candidate earlier in this decade and was an executive producer but uncredited on Ghost. There's some comedy in those two movies, I guess, but this is the comedy. Those are not so much. The movie's 239-1. We got the DVD from the Toronto Public Library, but it wouldn't work on our player, so we had to pay for it on Prime. I tried it downstairs. It would work down there, but we don't really have a setup for watching movies down there anymore in our new place, so we settled for paying the $5. Burns my eyes.
We've saved a lot of money by taking advantage of our public library. We were both very avid library users, so once in a while they let us down.
Yeah, that's true. The cinematographer, Robert Hauser, who's working on mostly one set, he shot some films like Le Mans, so the racing movie, Le Mans, but Le Mans, whole different thing than this, but shot many famous TV shows. He has way more famous TV credits than he does film credits. Frank Brocht cut it. His only Oscar nomination was for this film. He also cut White Christmas, which we covered a couple years ago, and Hood earlier in this decade.
What's your take on this movie getting an Oscar nomination for the editing?
Well, you're the comedy person, meaning you did stand-up comedy, and you're the editor, meaning that's your job. Comedies, as well as horror films, more than anything else, need a great pace. And it's funny how often horror films and comedies don't win or even get nominated for Oscars. I'll ask you that question right back at you. What do you think about the pace then?
I would say 75% of the scenes in this movie I would not touch. They are perfect just the way they are, but I could easily take 10 minutes out of this film.
So you're saying no nomination then?
There's just some jokes that go on for too long. It was 55 years ago. So it's tough for me to judge. Comedy notoriously never ages well. But to me, I felt like the editing, they just should have been a little more brutal with this.
Well, the winner, Bullet, I don't remember. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but I'm sure that mostly won for the car chase.
Of course.
French Connection also, I think, won for its editing. The second most famous car chase, maybe more famous actually than Bullet at this point.
It's just more showy editing. Editing is such a difficult award to give because you just never know what people are starting with.
Yeah.
Sometimes a movie can seem pretty mediocre, but actually the editor performed absolute miracles to just get it to mediocre.
I don't think we got shifty in our seats, though. I think this movie is pretty well paced. It's not that long.
It's true. It doesn't feel too long. But I do think that some of the scenes are bloated and go on longer than they need to.
Fairly typical for old movies, though.
Yeah, fair enough. Isn't Oliver the same year as this?
Yeah.
A far more bloated film.
We talked about that, yeah.
Yeah.
Way longer than it needs to be. The music composer, Neil Hefti, he wrote the Batman TV theme. So here you've got Dun, 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 which of course became the TV theme, and I assume for the other, maybe not every other TV series, but probably it definitely
Same
was.
man wrote no
for
no
the
no 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 no.
But the Klugman and Randall one. But then yeah, you got the Batman. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na. That's a career. Those two things alone.
Come on, that is just one of the most famous pieces of music. So deeply recognizable.
He also composed for Barefoot in the Park, Gene Saks' first ever film as a director. What do you think then? You just said about the cutting, but the composing, if you remember that at all, the look. I guess we talked about the writing and direction already.
I think the main problem with the technicals is that it just doesn't really escape the stage. I know it's easier said than done because a lot of movies that are adapted from stage plays fall into the same trap. They just can't get away from that one set, and they can't even get that one set to look like a realistic room. B+ would be my grade for this one.
So as I scroll through some of Neil Simon's credits here, Barefoot in the Park is a New York set movie in an apartment mostly. Obviously, it's in a park at some point. The Odd Couple, of course. The Out-of-Towners, Lemon again. I don't remember that one so well. I can't really comment on that. Heartbreak Kid. Okay, that one's, I think, in Vacation in the Caribbean or something like that. Don't remember. Sunshine Boys, as I recall, that's Matthau. I believe that's pretty housebound as well, or apartment-bound probably. Murdered by Death, I think they're mostly in some posh house. Goodbye Girl, Richard Dreyfuss and Marsha Mason, I think mostly in a New York apartment building. This was the Neil Simon specialty. New York apartment buildings, people talking, funny.
It's a play, though. You're so limited.
That's on the director, then.
With a play.
That's
it is on the director. Yeah. They did add some locations that didn't exist in the play. I'm not sure about the whole opening with Felix trying to kill himself in the hotel room. I don't know if that's drawn from the play, but I know that the scene at the ballpark was...
well, of course not. Yeah, there's no way that was like, in the movie.
Right.
Or the play.
Yeah, that was added into the movie to give it a little more...
Open it up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, then. Fun time at the movies. The Odd Couple, 55 years old tomorrow. Your last thoughts on The Odd Couple?
A charming diversion, but maybe, like most comedies, it's lost its punch over time.
We laughed quite a lot. The two guys, of course, had tremendous chemistry. And that line about taking 3 hours to figure out FU stood for Felix Unger as one of the funniest in any movie. One of those I liked when I first saw the film, but I've grown to like more. And I knew it was coming, and I didn't want to blow it for you, so I tried not to laugh before he actually said it. But as soon as it was out of his mouth, I was LOLing.
I appreciate that you just let it happen on its own.
And if this movie was on TCM one day in the future, I'd watch it again. Okay, that was The Odd Couple. Lemon and Matthau. First time we've ever covered them, and first time Matthau's been covered on this channel, period. On Friday, a John Huston and Humphrey Bogart movie will be covered for the first time in quite some time. I will be alone during my solo podcast of Key Largo. I just felt like it was time to talk about those guys again, because it's been a long time. They each had 4 AFI movies, so that's how long ago it's been. We haven't covered either of them since, unless I missed something. Neither of them. And I like Huston a lot. I like Bogart, but Huston... one of the great directors. Plus, I recorded the movie off TCM, so easy access. And as I recall, the print was pretty good. As for next Monday, Bev will be taking Victoria Day off, but you'll still get an episode. I'll be in front of the mic on my own talking about a movie I recommended during Black History Month back in February, Martin Ritt's Sounder. And it's on Canopy, so again, access. But all that said, the next time the two of us post a podcast will be on May 29th. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse comes out June 2nd. That's going to be a hit. So we'll prep for that by going back 5 years to take another look at Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I know you love that movie. It made your top 10 of the entire decade.
It made number 2.
Oh, was that high? Right.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan too. You might be more than me, which is surprising. So the coming attractions opinion question for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse on May 29th. Which is your favorite version of the various Spider-Men or Spider-Women or Spider-Pigs or Spider-Whatevers in Into the Spider-Verse?
Ooh, I love that question. And for our answers, check out our next podcast together about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to please favorite or subscribe wherever you listen. Then you'll always be first to know when we have a new episode. And wherever you find us, you will have access to our archive of over 500 episodes that are all available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51, or you can reach us by email. Have you ever seen podcast@gmail.com. You can also find our podcast plus some bonus material.
It's been a while.
On YouTube at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
The YouTube thing, quickly, by the way, is becoming handy for someone like me who's recently had some problems with his phone playing podcasts properly. So yes, it's the exact same thing lately. even when we've had no bonus content. But if you've had problems with your podcast app or earbuds like I have lately, then you've got YouTube as an option. So that's one reason we're doing it, and to grow the brand as well, because who knows, somebody might find that and then say, hey, I didn't know these guys existed. Let's find them online, meaning the podcast app. Anyway, Bev, I meant to remind you that we're out of cornflakes. F you. And I don't even eat cereal, but still, F you.
And cut.
Do 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 do. I am Felix, and Bev is Oscar. Sort of, not entirely, kind of like them.